13-year-old girl pregnant rushed to the emergency room. She revealed the truth to the doctor. "Hello, everyone. Enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch Evelyn." A 13-year-old girl was sitting on her bed with a pale face. "Mom, it hurts so much," Evelyn whimpered, her voice weak. Isabella, Evelyn's mother, was busy in the kitchen, but rushed upstairs the moment she heard her daughter's cry. As soon as she saw Evelyn, her heart clenched. The girl's face was ghostly white, her eyes brimming with tears. "Evelyn, what's wrong?" Isabella cried out in panic, kneeling beside her daughter and placing a hand on her forehead, ice cold. Evelyn didn't answer. She only gripped her mother's hand tightly, her fingernails digging into Isabella's skin. The pain was so unbearable that she could hardly breathe. "Mrs. Isabella, what's going on?" a voice called from the doorway. Mrs. Rose, Isabella's neighbor, had been passing by when she heard the desperate cries, saw Evelyn trembling, her lips turning blue, and immediately stepped inside Mrs. Rose. "I don't know, she's been complaining of stomach pain. Since morning I thought it was just indigestion, but now, oh God, she can't take it anymore." Isabella trembled, wrapping her arms around Evelyn. "We need to get her to the hospital right away," Mrs. Rose said firmly, without hesitation. Isabella tried to help her daughter up, but the moment Evelyn's feet touched the ground, her body convulsed violently and she collapsed unconscious in her mother's arms. Evelyn, wake up, sweetheart," Isabella screamed. The sky poured rain like a waterfall, each heavy drop lashing against the car's windshield, blurring the view. Blinding flashes of lightning tore through the pitch-black sky. Thunder roared like a forewarning of something terrible about to happen. On the deserted road, the car sped madly through the blinding rain. In the back seat, Isabella held Evelyn tightly in her arms, the girl's body trembling, her breath faint. "Evelyn, sweetie, wake up. We're almost there. Hang on," she whispered in her daughter's ear, crying while wiping the rain and cold sweat streaming down the girl's forehead. Evelyn's face was pale, her lips purple, her eyes shut tight, looking as fragile as if she could vanish at any moment. The driver accelerated, tires screeching across the slippery road. The hospital lights gradually appeared, blurred in the thick rain. As soon as the car stopped at the emergency gate, the door flung open, and medical staff in white gowns and masks rushed over. "Emergency case," someone shouted. Evelyn was carried out of the car, placed on a stretcher, and quickly wheeled inside while Isabella followed, slipping on the cold, wet tile floor. "Please save my girl. She's been in pain since this morning, but now she's not conscious anymore," Isabella sobbed, her trembling hand clutching the nurse pushing the stretcher. In the emergency room, Dr. Anna, a middle-aged woman with sharp but compassionate eyes, had just started her shift minutes ago when she was urgently called in. She hurried into the room upon seeing the unusual symptoms of the patient: rapidly dropping blood pressure, irregular pulse, pale skin, slightly distended abdomen. "Immediate blood test and abdominal ultrasound. Urgent," she ordered, her voice firm but full of concern. A nurse quickly drew blood while another prepared the ultrasound machine. In the cold room under pale white light, Isabella stood outside the glass window, her hand pressed against the icy surface, eyes wide with panic watching the doctor's every move inside. Evelyn remained unconscious, her lips moving slightly as if trying to speak, but unable to form words. Isabella's heart pounded wildly. Her chest tightened with a vague fear, a mother's instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. When the ultrasound probe was placed on Evelyn's abdomen, images began to appear on the screen. At first, Dr. Anna thought it was just a digestive disorder or infection. But within seconds, she was stunned. Her eyes widened, hands frozen. She stared at the screen. In the speckled black and white image, something unmistakably clear appeared. A fetus developing in Evelyn's womb. The fetal heartbeat echoed loudly through the ultrasound speaker, a sacred sound in normal circumstances, but now it struck like thunder in the heart. "No way," Anna murmured, her hands trembling. She looked up at the medical record just handed to her. Age, 13. She could hardly believe her eyes. She double-checked, then looked back at the ultrasound screen. No mistake, it was a real fetus, and the girl was only 13 years old. The room suddenly fell into an eerie silence. The surrounding nurses froze, looking at each other in horror. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The truth was present, exposed nakedly in those black and white images. Anna stepped out of the room, her face pale. She walked toward Isabella, who was sitting on a bench in the hallway, her face ghostly white and eyes swollen red. "Evelyn's condition has been temporarily stabilized, but I need to speak with you in private." Isabella nodded, her legs shaky as if about to collapse. They walked into a nearby consultation room. Anna sat across from her, slowly beginning, trying to stay calm. "The ultrasound results show Evelyn is pregnant." The words rang out like a sharp blade slicing through the air, plunging deep into the mother's heart. Isabella sat in stunned silence. She didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't react for several seconds. Then suddenly she sprang up, mouth agape, hands clutching her head as if unable to accept it. No way. She's only 13. Just yesterday she was hugging a teddy bear sleeping in my arms. No way, she screamed, her sobs echoing through the quiet hallway. Anna bowed her head, eyes red. In her 10 years as an obstetrician, she had witnessed many tragic cases, but in this moment, her heart clenched. A tiny girl who hadn't yet fully lived her childhood now had to bear something so cruel. Isabella collapsed to her knees on the cold tile floor, her hands gripping her dress tightly, screaming in despair. "She's everything to me. I tried to raise her well. Why my daughter? Who did this to her?" Her cries echoed against every cold wall, like a desperate plea from the depths of her soul. Passing nurses stood frozen. No one dared to enter, only watching from afar, heads bowed silently. Meanwhile, Evelyn still lay motionless on the bed, her eyes slightly fluttering. The pain had subsided, but a new fear loomed ahead. Outside, the rain had not stopped. Heavy drops fell on the hospital roof like the sky's weary sighs. A dark chapter had just opened in Evelyn's young life, and no one knew that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with tears and terrifying truths yet to be revealed. The dim light from the ceiling lamp shone down on Evelyn's pale face. The room was so quiet that the sound of the heart rate monitor echoed clearly with each steady beat. The air carried the distinct smell of hospital antiseptic, cold and gloomy. The little girl stirred slightly, her eyelids trembling as if struggling with a terrible nightmare. A soft moan escaped her throat. Then, her eyes slowly opened. Before Evelyn was a familiar but deeply sorrowful face. Her mother, Isabella, sitting right beside the bed, clutching the girl's hand tightly, unwilling to let go. The mother's eyes were red, her face gaunt from hours without sleep, filled with unrelenting worry and pain. When the mother and daughter's eyes met, Evelyn blinked several times, as if she couldn't believe she was still alive. Then suddenly, tears poured out uncontrollably. She burst into silent sobs, only choked gasps escaping her lips. Isabella leaned down, wrapping her daughter in trembling arms, whispering in her ear, "Mommy's here. It's okay. I'm here with you. Isabella tried to hold back her tears, but her heart felt like it was being crushed at the sight of her daughter's haunted gaze. Her child, a little angel only 13 years old, now lay here, her eyes full of tears, her fragile body trembling in fear. She stroked her daughter's hair and gently asked, "Who did this to you? Tell me, my love." Her voice was no longer that of a regular mother, but a desperate plea. Evelyn squeezed her mother's hand tightly, but didn't respond. She only shook her head, lips pressed shut, tears still streaming down her cheeks. Her eyes avoided contact. Then suddenly she pulled her hand away and tugged the blanket over her head. A terrifying silence engulfed the room. Then from under the blanket a whisper emerged, so faint it was barely audible. "I'm scared. If I tell, he'll kill me." Isabella froze. That sentence felt like a blade stabbing straight into her heart. She could never have imagined that behind her daughter's physical pain lay such a horrific truth, a fear that had consumed the girl for who knows how long, only now beginning to surface. She held her daughter close, tears streaming uncontrollably. "It's okay, my love. It's okay now. I'm here. I'll protect you. No one can hurt you anymore." But Evelyn still didn't dare peek out from under the blanket. Her body shook in waves, and her sobs grew louder. Isabella sat motionless for a long while, then gently left the room to find the doctor. Dr. Anna, the physician who had been treating Evelyn since she was admitted, arrived shortly after. Isabella grasped her hand, eyes pleading. "Please, she knows who did it, but she's too scared to say. She's afraid. Please, is there anything we can do?" Dr. Anna nodded. She spoke in a calm voice. "I'll call the police. We have an officer who specializes in juvenile cases. He knows how to approach sensitive situations like this." Isabella nodded silently. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that if she wanted to save her daughter, the truth had to come to light. A few hours later, when Evelyn had dozed off from exhaustion, a man appeared at the doorway. He was James, a seasoned police officer. He wasn't in uniform but carried only a notebook and a calm, simple appearance. Isabella stood as he entered. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. James nodded and walked over to the hospital bed. When his gaze accidentally met Evelyn's, she suddenly woke up, eyes full of fear. She immediately turned away, curled up, and pulled the blanket tightly over her head. James didn't rush. He sat down in the chair by the window, keeping a respectful distance. He spoke in a warm, gentle voice. "Hello, I'm James. I'm only here to help you. I know you're very scared, but I'm here to protect you. No one can hurt you when your mom and I are here with you." Evelyn didn't respond, but from under the blanket, faint sobs could still be heard. Isabella came to the bedside, held her daughter's hand, and tried to comfort her. "You're safe now. You're not alone anymore." After a few minutes of silence, at last, a small voice whispered. "He said, if I told, he'd kill Mommy." The words froze the air in the room. Isabella choked on her tears, unable to speak, while James sat up straight, a flicker of anger flashing in his eyes, contained only by the composure of a veteran. He moved a little closer and said slowly, "You know, those who do wrong always want others to stay silent. But that's exactly why we have to speak up, so no one else gets hurt like you did." Evelyn shifted slightly, her face still hidden beneath the blanket. "I don't know. I'm really scared," she whispered, and her sobs rose again. Isabella placed her hand gently on her daughter's forehead, whispering, "I'm here. You don't have to be afraid anymore." James stood up, stepped back, then spoke with steady resolve. "I won't make you talk now, but when you're ready, I'll be here, and I promise I won't let anyone hurt you ever again." The sound of shoes echoed softly on the white-tiled floor of the hospital hallway, each step drawing closer as if thickening the air in the room. In the still tension-filled hospital room, Evelyn lay motionless on the bed, her small body covered by a light blue blanket, her thin shoulders twitching slightly at every noise from outside. James stood near the window, reviewing notes in his notebook, while Isabella sat beside her daughter's bed, her eyes fixed on Evelyn's face. No one spoke. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath in an unusually long silence. The door quietly opened. A man walked in with an oddly calm demeanor. His shirt was buttoned neatly, shiny black shoes, hair slicked back without a strand out of place. It was Lucas, Evelyn's stepfather. Lucas entered without hurry, his eyes sweeping across the room, briefly pausing on James before resting on the bed where Evelyn lay. Not a single frown. No sign of confusion or emotion showed on his face. On the contrary, Lucas's expression was so quiet it felt cold, as if this were just a routine visit, unrelated to a painful tragedy that had just struck the family. The moment Lucas's gaze fell upon where Evelyn lay, something terrible happened. Evelyn immediately reacted. She shrank like a withered leaf caught in the wind, her trembling hands yanking the blanket over her head. She said nothing, but her whole body shook violently. From beneath the blanket came a faint sob, like a small creature cornered in a dark space with no escape. Isabella, startled, turned to her daughter, intending to comfort her, but the girl's hand gripped her mother's shirt tightly, as if pleading, "Don't let him come near." James immediately recognized the drastic change in Evelyn's demeanor. As an officer who had worked with many child victims, he was all too familiar with this reaction. It wasn't simply surprise or discomfort. It was pure fear, a panic born from deep memories, from unspoken wounds. He stepped slowly forward, gently positioning himself in front of the hospital bed, his eyes locked on Lucas. "You're Lucas, Evelyn's stepfather?" Lucas nodded, his eyes unblinking. "Yes, I got a call from my wife and came right away." James kept a calm tone. "Thank you for being here. Evelyn really needs rest right now. However, due to the seriousness of the case, I need your cooperation to clarify a few things." Lucas remained still, hands clasped together, his posture showing no emotion. "When was the last time you saw Evelyn?" James asked. Lucas answered as if prepared beforehand. "Last night, the whole family had dinner together. She said she had a stomachache and went to her room to rest. I thought it was just a common cold." He paused for a moment, then added, "I didn't expect things to be this serious." James wrote in his notebook, his eyes flicking between Lucas's reaction and observing Evelyn. The girl hadn't moved under the blanket, but her fragile shoulders still trembled. James continued, "Did you notice anything unusual? Changes in mood, behavior, emotions?" Lucas slowly shook his head. "No, she's quiet, stays in her room all day, but I thought that was normal for her age. I didn't interfere much, gave her her own space." Silence stretched. The air in the room felt strangled by an invisible force. From beneath the blanket, Evelyn stirred slightly. A small part of her face appeared from under the fabric, enough for James to see her eyes. And in that moment, everything became clear. Those eyes were full of fear, shrinking, silent, avoiding. But they were also eyes that screamed, that spoke to James the things she could not say aloud. No one teaches a child how to react to the one who destroyed their childhood. But Evelyn's eyes now were the strongest accusation. That was not the look one gave to a father. James turned to look at Lucas again, and in the eerily calm gaze of that man, he read defensiveness, calculation, and a chilling coldness. He knew that kind of man well, one who had mastered hiding crimes behind a respectable facade, who even believed he could overcome every question, every suspicion, through sheer composure. But he also knew a child would never react like Evelyn did, without a reason. Night fell over the hospital like a thick velvet curtain, cloaking secrets too painful to name. The hallway lights cast a pale yellow glow through the glass windows, silhouettes stretching silently across the white walls. Inside the small room where Evelyn lay, everything was enveloped in stillness, save for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the quiet scratch of James's pen as he took notes. After a tense meeting with Lucas, James had proactively requested a private conversation with Evelyn. He asked everyone, even Isabella, to step outside temporarily. so the girl could feel completely safe. Isabella hesitated, her gaze lingering on her daughter as though she couldn't bear to part. But eventually, she nodded, gently stroked Evelyn's hair, and whispered, "Mommy's right outside the door. Sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere." Once it was just the two of them in the room, James pulled a chair closer to the bed. He didn't start asking questions right away. He simply sat there, placing his notebook and pen on the table, his eyes turned toward the window. The air between them was eerily calm. He knew that a child who had endured deep trauma needed time, not a barrage of questions. A few minutes later, Evelyn slowly pulled the blanket down, revealing a tear-swollen face. Her eyes still held drops of tears that hadn't yet fallen. And then, in that quiet space, she whispered as if afraid of the sound of her own voice, "It was Lucas." James didn't turn his head. He let the girl continue, letting the flow of emotion open naturally. "I'm so scared. If he finds out, I'll die." Those words made James's heart sink, but his voice remained gentle. "I understand, but now you're not alone anymore. I promise I'll protect you. Your mother is here, and there's also Dr. Anna and the whole police department. You're no longer alone." Evelyn looked at him, her eyes wavering between trust and fear. She whispered another plea. "Don't let him know it was me who told." James nodded. "I promise. I'll do everything to keep you safe, and we'll need evidence, so no one can doubt the truth anymore." Immediately afterward, James left the room and spoke urgently with Dr. Anna. They agreed the next step was to check Evelyn's phone. Even though she was young, in today's world, communication from various sources was entirely possible. And if Lucas had truly been threatening or manipulating Evelyn, he might have left behind traces, even the smallest ones. Evelyn's phone was confiscated that very night. On the surface, nothing unusual appeared in her messages. But James didn't stop there. He had the device sent to the digital forensics department, where experts could recover deleted data. While awaiting results, the hospital was gripped with a heavy silence, like a silent courtroom held in the minds of everyone involved. Isabella buried her face in her hands, praying and weeping quietly. James examined every detail, writing an urgent report to initiate witness protection procedures for Evelyn. As for Evelyn, she remained quiet. But in her eyes, for the first time in many days, there was a faint glimmer, like a sliver of hope beginning to flicker. A few days later, the results came back. The forensic expert reported that they had recovered a series of deleted messages from Evelyn's phone. The messages had come from an unknown number, but upon tracing, the number was registered under the name Lucas. The contents of the messages were filled with threats, manipulation, and control. "Stay quiet if you don't want your mom to die too." One message read, "I'll tell everyone you're a filthy girl if you dare speak to anyone," said another. Some messages were even more cruel, including knife emojis and symbolic but unmistakable images of threats. Each line was undeniable evidence of the terror Evelyn had endured in silence. But that wasn't all. The results of the fetal DNA test, taken from Evelyn's blood and fetal tissue from the ultrasound, had also arrived at the hospital after an urgent analysis. James was the one who opened the sealed envelope. When he read the name that matched, his heart sank. Lucas, there was no doubt. That man wasn't just the one who had tormented her mentally. He was the one who had inflicted the most horrific pain upon a child who hadn't even had the chance to grow up. James clutched the folder tightly, his eyes gleaming with a silent fury. But he didn't let emotion override his reason. He knew it was time to act. And this time, justice would speak on behalf of the voice that had been silenced for months. A girl named Evelyn. That morning, the sky was gloomy. Mist veiled the path as if signaling a heavy day to come. The central police station was located in an old building with foggy glass windows and white-gray walls stained by time. Inside, James sat in interrogation room number 3, his eyes locked on the file in front of him, as if trying to engrave every word into memory. What lay within that file was not just evidence. It was the validation of a child's fear of abuse, and the unspoken testimony that Evelyn had kept buried in her heart all this time. A police officer approached James and whispered, "Lucas has arrived. "He's in the waiting room." James nodded and stood up. He adjusted his collar, gripped the file slightly tighter, and walked out of the room. Each step echoed down the long hallway like a pounding drum inside his chest. He knew today was a significant day, not just because a criminal was about to be unmasked, but because justice was finally about to speak up for a child who was never meant to know such pain. Lucas was already waiting, still looking as polished as ever. His white shirt was crisply ironed, and a gold-plated watch gleamed under the fluorescent light. When James entered, Lucas stood up and extended a hand as if this were merely a routine meeting. James didn't shake it. He simply gave a brief nod and motioned for Lucas to enter the room. The door shut behind them, soundproofed almost completely. No more outside noise, just the two of them. One officer who had seen too many crimes, and one man trying to conceal the monster in his eyes. Lucas sat in the chair, hands folded neatly on the table. James didn't speak immediately. He pulled out a stack of documents from the file. One sheet at a time was placed gently on the table. Screenshots of threatening messages, system logs from the telecom provider, IP addresses, phone number verification, forensic reports from Evelyn's phone. Each paper landed like a hammer blow on the composed mask Lucas wore. Lucas glanced at each document. He didn't blink, but his jaw twitched. Still, he tried to keep his voice calm. "I don't know what these are. Maybe someone used my phone." James pushed the DNA test result forward toward Lucas. "And what about this?" On the paper were the bolded words, "Match result 99. 99% between DNA sample from subject Lucas W. and fetal DNA sample." Lucas went quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, a dry, emotionless laugh. "You think I'll confess because of a piece of paper?" he sneered. "No, I don't need your confession," James replied calmly. "The court will handle that. All I need to do is protect Evelyn, right now." At that moment, two officers entered. One opened the handcuffs. The other stepped in to restrain Lucas. He struggled, yelling, "I'm innocent! You have no right to arrest me. This is a setup." James stood up and replied calmly, "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used as evidence in court." Lucas kept thrashing, shouting down the hallway, but no one responded. His footsteps echoed as he was escorted to the holding cell, his face flushed red with fury, his eyes blazing. And in those eyes, James saw something unforgettable. Emptiness. A gaze without remorse, without guilt, only hatred, as if the crime he committed was somehow the victim's fault. On the other side of the hallway, Evelyn's hospital room door was slightly ajar. Isabella had just helped her daughter out for a short walk to get some fresh air. They hadn't expected it to be right then. When the officers were escorting Lucas past, both mother and daughter froze. Lucas's eyes happened to meet Evelyn's. In those few brief seconds, everything seemed to freeze. Lucas turned to look at the girl, and in that gaze, there was no apology. Only darkness, hatred, and a shadowy threat like an invisible blade slashing through Evelyn's soul. Those eyes carved themselves into her memory, like a ghost that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Evelyn trembled violently. She clung to her mother's arm, tears spilling from her eyes. Isabella quickly turned her daughter around, shielding her with her body as if protecting her from a storm. But Evelyn didn't cry out of fear. She cried because finally, she had seen the one who haunted her being taken away, with eyes that no longer held power. The days following Lucas's arrest, the hospital was no longer just a place for healing physical wounds. It became a space to confront pains invisible to the naked eye. Evelyn remained in the same familiar hospital room, but the atmosphere had shifted. Lucas was gone, yet the shadow he left in the girl's soul had not faded. She still woke up with a start in the middle of the night, gasping for breath, tears streaming uncontrollably. Any sound louder than usual, any unfamiliar figure passing the glass door could turn Evelyn pale, shrinking back as if trying to disappear from the world. At the doctor's request, the room now had all sound-producing devices turned off. The curtains were always drawn, and a soft, stable light was maintained. But inside Evelyn, no light could break through. Each time someone entered the room, the girl clung tightly to her mother's arm, her eyes lost, silently asking, "Is it really safe?" Isabella never left her daughter's side. Not for a moment, day or night. But each passing second shattered her from within. An unshakable guilt gnawed at the mother's heart. Many times she collapsed onto the hospital floor while Evelyn slept, burying her face in her hands, murmuring, "I'm a terrible mother. I didn't protect her. I didn't see it sooner." These words weren't meant for others to hear. They were to release the unbearable weight inside her. She blamed herself for trusting the wrong person. She blamed herself for the exhaustion that made her overlook her daughter's haunted eyes, the unusually quiet footsteps at night. The scratches, Evelyn always said, were from falling. Dr. Anna, who had been with Evelyn from the start, began guiding her into psychological therapy, but she knew all too well. Emotional trauma doesn't fade overnight. It's not like a surface wound that can be stitched with needle and thread. It's something that requires patience, love, and an environment safe enough to heal, little by little. James visited Evelyn regularly. Each time he entered the room, he knocked softly, never abruptly. He came not with notebooks or case files, but with small gifts, a children's book, a colored picture, a tiny toy, as if to say, "You're not just a witness, you're a child who deserves to be loved." One afternoon, with rain tapping gently against the window, James sat across from Isabella and spoke softly. "We're processing the relocation paperwork for you both. Under the state's victim protection program, you'll be given temporary identities, a new place to live, financial and psychological support for the beginning. A new life is waiting, somewhere no one knows what happened, a place where you and your daughter can start over." Isabella was silent. She didn't respond immediately, but tears fell, quietly and gently. Not from pain, but because for the first time, she saw a way out, distant yet real. Evelyn sat by the window, watching the rain. She was still afraid, but at least that fear no longer wrapped around her completely. When she heard her mother talk about moving, when she heard James say no one would find them, she turned and hesitantly asked, "In that place, will he know?" James stepped closer, knelt to her eye level. He looked deep into those fearful eyes, and spoke with all the sincerity a man who had once been a father could offer. "No one will find you. No one can hurt you. I give you that promise with all my honor." Evelyn looked at him, her eyes searching for something to believe in. Then she rested her head on her mother's shoulder, sobbing, her voice like the wind whispering through the curtains. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." That morning the sky was gloomy. Mist veiled the path as if signaling a heavy day to come. The district court opened the hearing with tightened security. Behind the tall walls was a long journey of pain, of waiting for justice, and of a little girl who, for the first time, dared to step out of the shadows to face the one who had shattered her childhood. Evelyn sat beside her mother in the waiting room, wearing the beige sweater James had personally wrapped and given her a few days ago. Beside them was Dr. Anna, who was not just a doctor but like family during the hospital days. Isabella held her daughter's hand tightly. Her chest tightened every time she remembered Evelyn's panicked eyes, the midnight terrors when her daughter would wake up screaming, gasping, begging, "Don't let him touch me again." The courtroom door opened. Evelyn slowly stepped in, her small hand still gripping her mother's. But this time she didn't hide under a blanket, didn't retreat into the dark. She was present, and that was a victory. Lucas was escorted into the center of the room. His hands were cuffed, his posture still arrogant, as if he had done nothing wrong. When his eyes unintentionally passed over the row where Evelyn sat, a chill ran down the girl's spine. But she did not lower her head. Evelyn looked straight ahead. Her eyes, though still afraid, did not avoid. In those eyes was the strength of someone who had collapsed but stood back up. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Each piece of evidence was presented. Forensic data, threatening messages, matching DNA results, testimonies from psychologists, doctors, and investigating officers. All formed an undeniable chain of proof. There was nothing left to hide, nothing left to deny. Lucas's lawyer offered weak rebuttals, trying to cite mental pressure and family history, but no one in the room believed those reasons could excuse the crimes committed. When invited to speak last, Evelyn stood up. She didn't say much, just spoke softly, her voice trembling but clear. "I don't want anyone else to stay silent like I did. I don't want to be afraid anymore. The judge struck the gavel. The court sentences Lucas William to 25 years in prison. No parole. The entire room fell silent. No applause, no sighs. Only the white light from the ceiling reflecting off a small face trembling, but no longer from fear. Evelyn turned and hugged her mother tightly. She cried, but for the first time, it wasn't from pain. It was because she felt protected. Because, for the first time, the past was no longer a monster looming in front of her. James stepped forward, placed a hand on the girl's shoulder, and leaned down. You are very brave, and you are not alone anymore. Evelyn sat quietly for a long time. She felt the invisible chains around her heart fall away. Inside, there was an emptiness. But this time, it was a space for something new, hope. Outside the court, the last light of the afternoon filtered through the leaves. Journalists were kept at a distance. While Evelyn was taken out through the side exit, a car was already waiting. Not just to take them away from the courthouse, but to bring them to a place where a new life would begin. In the car seat, Evelyn looked out the window. Her messy hair danced lightly in the wind. In her eyes, the sky was no longer dark. Only one sentence echoed in her heart. I survived, and I will keep living. 1 week after the court's verdict, Evelyn and her mother left their old town in silence. They said no goodbyes, left nothing behind but the silhouette of two figures disappearing into the mist at the end of the road. The bare trees lining both sides of the street stood as quiet witnesses, bidding farewell to two weary souls burdened by too many wounds. The small car belonging to the witness protection officer rolled forward through the early morning fog, carrying them to a new city where no one knew who they were and where the painful past would no longer have a voice. Evelyn sat in the back seat, resting her head on her mother's shoulder, clutching a small backpack in her arms. Inside were a few neatly folded clothes, a small photo frame, and one special item, a light brown leather diary that James had given her before they left. He hadn't said much, just gently placed it in her hands, then bent down and looked deeply into those eyes once filled with terror and despair, leaving her with a warm whisper. Write down your journey of healing, because one day you'll be the light for someone else. The girl didn't reply. She only clutched the notebook tightly, as if making a silent promise. Throughout the drive on the highway, she spoke little, but her eyes no longer held the fear they once did. Something had changed. Maybe it was the trial. Maybe it was the promises of protection. Maybe it was simply because at last she knew she had survived. The new city gradually emerged beyond the distant mountain range. Quaint houses, sunlit apartment buildings, busy streams of people, but no one stared at them like they didn't belong. Isabella tilted her head toward her daughter, gently stroking the girl's hair. How long had it been since she'd seen her child sit so quietly without trembling in fear? How many sleepless nights had passed, with Evelyn sobbing in her dreams, calling for her mother in panic, clutching the blanket as if holding on for life. But now, in the car seat, Evelyn wasn't hiding under a blanket. She wasn't clinging to anyone. She simply sat there, breathing slowly, looking outside, where the sky had become brighter. She opened her backpack and took out the diary. The first page was still blank. She held the pen, hesitating slightly. Then, she began to write, slowly and carefully. Today is the first day of freedom. She stared at those words for a long time. She didn't write more, and didn't need to. That was all that needed to be said for a new beginning. In her heart, no wound still bled. They had all turned to scars. Still there, but no longer strong enough to bring her down. When the car turned into the protected housing area for those under witness protection, Isabella held her daughter's hand. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were full of faith. Evelyn looked at her mother and smiled. The first true smile in many long months of darkness. We're starting over, aren't we, Mom? She whispered. Isabella nodded, her voice choked. Yes, sweetheart. This time I'll walk with you every step of the way. The evening sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on the still open diary, its first page fluttering gently in the breeze. The sky was no longer gray, and ahead of them was a whole life left to heal. Evelyn had written the first words of her new life and closed the final door of the past. She was no longer a victim. She was proof that even if you walk through hell, you can return. If there's still a little hope in your heart, a mother's hand, and a promise from those who truly want to protect you. And so, the story closed, not with pain, but with a blank page, where love, justice, and faith had prevailed.